Maybe I'm wrong here, but I believe that the New Orleans Saints should have made a bigger deal out of selecting Pittsburgh wide receiver Bub Means in the 2024 NFL Draft. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I want to take a look at three things that the New Orleans Saints could have gotten done this offseason, but didn't, and we kind of wish that they would have. Now, I'm going to stick to things that are realistic, right? There are the big conversations like, oh, the Saints should have signed Justin Simmons. That could still potentially happen, but some might feel that that would be unrealistic. So I'm going to maybe focus in on some more of the maybe underrated but still impactful things they could have gotten done and didn't. We're going to take a look at the fact that signing a veteran defensive tackle could have gone a long way for this team, including some of the top options that were out there. Re-signing Andrus Peat could have changed the entire way that we're looking at the offensive line, at least for right now. But I want to start off with a look at wide receiver Bub Means, who was selected by the Saints in the 5th round, and how this draft pick could have been made out to be a bigger deal by the team. But there were some understandable obstacles. We got that coming up for you on today's episode and much more. We appreciate you very much. Making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a very proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed at Game Time. Look, I think the Saints could have made a bigger deal out of drafting Bub Means out of Pittsburgh in the 5th round. And look, there's a couple of different ways that they could go about this. All right. And there's a couple of different reasons why it didn't happen. So I'm going to try to acknowledge all of these things, but I'll forever be incomplete. And so there will be things that I'll miss here, but let me try to break it down as best as I can. The reason that I believe that the Saints could have made a bigger deal out of Bub Means is listen to every analyst that talks about Bub Means. I don't even mean the people that cover the team like me. You know what I mean? Like I like the player. I cover the team, all those other things. So there's a chance that I'm too close to it to be the one to say, hey, this guy can actually pan out to be something. But listen to the people that are disconnected from that. I mean, we had Sam Munson here on the show, the lead NFL analyst for Pro Football Focus, lead draft analyst, for Pro Football Focus. And one of the things that he talked about was how much a guy like Bub Means was looked at in that day 3 area as this 6'1", 200-pound wide receiver that was asked to do a very limited amount of things at Pittsburgh, but talent-wise himself is not very limited at all, and who has a real chance to get to this next level and perform better as a pro than he performed during his collegiate career, and talked about him as a guy that he felt would be like this fantastic steal or sleeper late in a draft. And he's not the only one that says that. We've heard that from several draft analysts out there that spend a lot more time, watching tape of these guys that have broken all of this stuff down and everything in ways that you expect that they get the right information out of watching these guys. And a lot of it's based on preference. What do they like? What play styles do they like? And how does that specific collegiate player check those boxes? But nonetheless, just imagine if the Saints were saying the same thing that the analysts were saying. We believe that this guy can really be an impact player. He's got a ways to go. He's got to develop to get there, but sharing the belief in terms of what the team actually has in a guy like Bub Means, I think would go a long way of exciting people more and more and more about the draft selection. And look, it hasn't kept people from being excited. People are very excited to see what Bub Means grows and becomes and things like that. And I think that there is an exciting future for him that's in the, foreseeable best timeline, if you will, if you're a community fan like I am. But it is interesting. And I think that making a bigger deal out of it would have gone a long way for this team and might have kind of at least presented a little bit of an answer of the question that everyone's asking is, what do you do at wide receiver after your top 2 guys, after your top 3 guys and things like that? And I think Bub Means should be a louder answer in those conversations and in those circles. Think about this. We spent a lot of time during the pre-draft process looking at Brendan Rice, the big 6 foot plus, 200 plus, pound wide receiver out of USC, Jerry Rice's son, and all the cool things that like come with that and everything. But prototypically, not a terribly dissimilar player from what Bub Means has to offer. Maybe a little bit more 50-50 ballish when it comes to Brendan Rice. But I think that the dynamic play style and the speed that Bub Means has is enough of a separator in a direction, like in a different direction, that there's still value in that selection. And we watched Brendan Rice trickle all the way down to Los Angeles Chargers at pick 225 or something like that. Like Jerry Rice was heated, like no one expected it to happen. But imagine if the Saints had taken Brendan Rice at 5 and the different way that would be discussed, the different way that would be talked about, right? And I think that like if we give Bub Means that same leverage of expectation, that maybe that quells some of those concerns, doubts, questions around what the rest of the wide receiver room looks like. I think that the other thing that kind of gets in the way of this maybe being a bigger deal of a draft selection is he wasn't the most heralded prospect coming out of college, right? I mean, he did some really cool things and really outstanding things at Pittsburgh without good quarterback play, again, with being asked to do limited things, but he was still able to do those things. And even though everybody knew that he was going to do those things, he still did them effectively, right? It's a big difference between doing what you're asked and doing what you're asked and producing. And then it's a big difference between doing what you're asked and producing, between that and doing what you're asked and knowing that everyone around you knows what you're being asked, and yet you still end up producing effectively, especially in the days of the NFL or in the game of the NFL. Think about Michael Thomas and the slant route conversation, right? If it was a problem, then they should have stopped it. And they never stopped it, right? Until eventually injuries became the actual stopping factor and all that. And then the other thing that I think that limits the conversation in addition to that is that there was a quarterback drafted before he was drafted, right? Spencer Rattler, the first non-first round quarterback of the draft, went to the New Orleans Saints. That is a big story. That is a big surprise as well to see him go all the way to pick 150 and everything, when he was expected to be a 3rd round pick and all these other things. And so I think that anytime that you have a quarterback in your draft class, that quarterback's going to get a lot of attention, and especially when there are so many built-in storylines like what comes with a Spencer Rattler. And Spencer Rattler is deserving of all the conversation. He's deserving of all the excitement. He's deserving of whatever. But I think that Bub Means is still deserving of some of this slice of pie of hype, excitement, and things like that. So I'm hoping that during training camp, we get to see a little bit more of number 16, and we get to see him maybe start to step into his own. He's got the attitude. He's got all the intangibles. He's got the drive. He's got the motivation. He has the joy that I think every player that wants to be or needs to be at their very best has to have if they're going to go that route, right? You can go the head down, uber determined, keep to yourself, just focus on my game kind of route as well. I just think that he's going the most optimal version of the I can be a real presence here kind of route. And so I'm just interested. I'm excited to see where that all goes. And maybe we don't see that in 2024. I have written down here in my notes, 2024 versus the future. And so maybe it's not a 2024 thing. Maybe it's a 2025, 2026 thing, 2027 thing, whatever it might be. But I think that there's a lot more excitement to be had around Bub Means. I just think that it's understandable to wait until he shows it or gets the opportunity to show it. And so that's why I'm really excited about training camp coming up. All right, coming up next, I think the Saints should have re-signed Andrus Peat, because just like how being more confident about Bub Means answers a lot of questions, having Andrus Peat answers a lot of questions over in your offensive line as well. Let's break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at Game Time, my absolute must-go destination for last-minute tickets, no matter where you are. What's your favorite baseball team? We don't have a baseball team in New Orleans, no professional MLB team. So maybe you're an Astros fan, maybe you're a Braves fan. Well, if you're looking to buy tickets and maybe take a trip to go and check out your favorite baseball team, highly recommend Game Time as the place to go. Or maybe you're traveling over the course of the summer and you want to bring in or take in some of that MLB action, regardless of who's playing, because you don't care about the favorite team. Maybe you just care about the sport. Game Time is the way to get that done. Tickets for single-digit dollar amounts, just about anywhere I've been so far over the course of the summer. On average, you're seeing folks save up to 60% on last-minute tickets by using Game Time, and they take all the guesswork out of the experience by showing you all-in pricing that you can toggle on so that there's no fees that surprise you. You can also see the view from your seat before you purchase the ticket. So take all the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets this summer with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints definitely should have re-signed Andrus Peat this offseason. Although I understand the convictions around why they shouldn't have and why it was a good decision to let it kind of all come to an end. But I think they probably would have gotten better benefit, especially looking at the contract that he signed in Las Vegas. Let's break it down here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports today. The second round of the NBA draft is done. So if you want to get all of the biggest stories going on as the NBA draft, I don't remember if I said NBA or NFL draft. Sorry, the NBA draft has officially come to a complete close. So if you want all the biggest stories, make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today, which is curated to give you all the biggest stories from around the world of sports from the folks that know the teams the best. You can find it on YouTube and, of course, on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well. Locked On Sports today is part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I think the New Orleans Saints should have re-signed Andrus Peat. Let's discuss why. All right, let me go into some things why. So I think, first of all, one of the biggest impact is that it lessens the questions that we all have about the New Orleans Saints offensive line, right? Like, I can't say everything is positive when it comes to the New Orleans Saints because, as I continuously say, my biggest concerns for them are in the trenches, the offensive line and the defensive line. And some of it is just like a prove it factor, right? There's young guys on that offensive line. If they all pan out, then things are great. Things are awesome. But until we see that, it's hard to project that will be the case. I'm just saying I'm waiting to see if it is. And I think you are too. We're all kind of in the same place of where we're kind of holding the magnifying glass, if you will, to the New Orleans Saints. And I think the offensive line is one of those big spots. And so there's a real chance that re-signing a guy like Andrus Peat probably would have made you feel a little bit better. Even though you still would have had the question marks, I don't think the question marks would have been as heavy as this year or as they are right now. Because think about this. The New Orleans Saints need to figure out what's going to happen for them, whether maybe it's not really figuring out who's going to start. Maybe we already know who's going to start in each of these places, but you got to figure out what the performance is going to be. I think that's fair to say at left tackle, at right tackle, and at left guard. How much better would you feel if the personnel involved in that conversation was no longer just Taliese Fuaga at left tackle, Nick Saldiveri at left guard, and Trevor Penning at right tackle, and instead looked more like Andrus Peat at left tackle, Nick Saldiveri at left guard, or even Trevor Penning at left guard, and then Taliese Fuaga at right tackle. Or keep the tackles the same, Taliese at left tackle, Trevor at right tackle, but then it's Andrus Peat at left guard. Do you feel better with that idea? I kind of do. And look, maybe I'm in the minority on that, all right? Or maybe we differ on that, but I think I feel a little bit better about that. But of course, the NFL is not always about feeling better, is it? It's about working with what you have and worrying about the talent that's in your building and not the talent that has either exited or never arrived in your building in the first place. I do understand that. But I think at worst, a re-signing and retention of Andrus Peat would have at least given you really valuable depth. At the absolute worst, even if you had the same three players slotting in at left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right? Fuaga, Penning, Saldiveri in that order. Even if that was the case, having Andrus Peat as your backup swing left guard, left tackle, your swing tackle, your sixth offensive lineman when you come out there for the Taysom Hill power runs and all those other things, I think that that still raises the floor of what your offensive line has the ability to be. We spoke yesterday about raising the floor or raising the top of a position group. And Andrus Peat could have been one that could have done both or either in that case, because either he raises the top of your position room as one of those top 5 starters on the field, or he raises the quality of depth as one of the guys behind those top 5 starters. And in any case, I think that the question marks, the inquiries that come around what the New Orleans Saints offensive line will look like in 2024 would have been drastically lessened by the retention of Andrus Peat. So why not retain Andrus Peat? What was the contract that he signed over in Las Vegas? Well, it's effectively a 1-year veteran minimum deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. His base salary is $1.21 million, which is the veteran minimum for his experience. Then he's also got option bonuses. He's got per game roster bonuses that equal up to like $340,000. And then he's got a signing bonus on top of that as well of just like $450,000 or something like that. So you're looking at a total cap hit of around $2.3 million. All in 1 year. No void years, nothing like that. Just $2.3 million. And you look at the Saints, who sat with over $5 million available up until they restructured Taysom Hill. Now they hover somewhere around $12 million or so being available. And it makes you wonder, like, okay, so if that deal didn't get done, there must have been something else, because obviously money wasn't the issue. Obviously money wasn't the issue. So I understand, and the note that I have written down for this one is turning the page. I understand that the New Orleans Saints this offseason, or let me not say that I understand, let me say it this way. It feels like the New Orleans Saints spent a good portion of this offseason turning the page on the previous regime, right? We saw the offensive coaching staff, which was most of the Peyton hires, kind of not pushed out, but moved on from, right? Parting ways. I don't want to make it sound like it was something where it was like this, mutiny or anything like that. It clearly wasn't a mutiny. It was just time to turn the page, right? We're seeing the Saints now lean into a brand new offensive system for the first time since Sean Payton was in the building in 2006. We saw the team part ways with draft picks and free agency signings and everything that were key parts of the Sean Payton era. I mean, the end of Michael Thomas's tenure with the New Orleans Saints was this offseason. The Saints didn't bring back Andrus Peat. The Saints didn't retain Zach Bond. The Saints moved on from a lot of those guys. It feels like the one guy that really remains outside of, Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis on the defensive side, who are all Dennis Allen guys. Feels like the one Sean Payton guy that's really hung on here is kind of Taysom, right? That was really the Sean Payton guy. You can throw maybe Juwan Johnson in that conversation, although I think Juwan has proven it since Sean Payton was around, and then the transition to tight end was a big part of him moving into a different place post Sean Payton, all these other things. So I think Taysom Hill's kind of the one remaining guy that's kind of left. And so I get that. I understand the idea of turning the page. And so maybe that became more important to the team in terms of establishing its new identity and moving on from things of the past. And instead became, and that became more important than what we were discussing earlier, which is the number figure. Maybe it was just a sheer interest conversation. But I do think that along with the defensive pieces that the Saints have hustled to keep around, they've done the work to keep Cam Jordan a Saint for the rest of his career, basically. Tyrann Mathieu should finish his career Saint. Demario Davis should finish his career Saint. They did the work to keep Marshawn Lattimore at least for this year, and then we'll see where things end up. Trade deadline, we'll see where things end up in the offseason, whatever it might be. But they didn't hustle to keep the offensive guys. And so I think there's a reason for that. And as much as I think that Andrus Peat would help a lot right now, I get it. I understand a bit about why it is they moved on. But boy, do I feel like he would make the questions on the offensive line just feel a lot less crucial to answer at this time, because it would feel more like they had more options to answer those questions, like a greater multiple choice selection than what they have right now, with Andrus Peat included. I mentioned that my other biggest concern outside of the offensive line was the trenches over on the defensive side. So I want to take a look at the defensive line now. Did the New Orleans Saints miss an opportunity to add either a big name or at least a more experienced veteran defensive tackle to their room, and how did they address it in other ways? We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints could have helped themselves pretty drastically in the 2024 NFL offseason by maybe investing a little bit more on their defensive interior in particular. Yesterday, we spoke about the good move that the New Orleans Saints made, which was adding speed to their defense, including adding Chase Young to their defensive line. But looking at the interior, it feels like the Saints could have still brought in more experienced talent there to really help take them up to the next level. So they didn't do that. I think that they could have. So let's take a look at what they could have done, where they might have missed, but also what they're relying on to have the same effect, even if the effect wasn't adding one of the several veteran defensive tackles that I'm going to bring up. Don't forget, we are your team every day. So coming up on Monday, which will be a show from Norway, I'm so excited for that. We're going to discuss why 2024 is so intriguing when it comes to quarterback Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints and their future. We have all that coming up for you next week. And look, I'm not going to sit here and go through that whole episode. You know what? I'm not going to tell you what I'm not going to do. Come through and find out what I do. Yeah, let's do it that way. All right, so I think that the New Orleans Saints could have used more improvement on their interior. And look, they still added there. Okay, I don't want to diminish the additions of the undrafted free agents. I definitely don't want to diminish the addition of Christian Boyd. He was somebody that we were excited about going all through the draft process, excited to see him land with the team. I'm still excited about him moving forward. But I'm talking about veteran experience here. And so maintaining a guy like Jack Heflin, who was on the practice squad last year, great. Adding Kendall Vickers, great. But I think more could have been done here. So let's take a look at why this is the case. So I think that one of the things that you're looking at is that the defensive interior is a place where the New Orleans Saints are drastically trying to improve. And there are some inherent improvements that will happen with guys like Colin Saunders as well as Nathan Shepard going into their second year. There's inherent improvement that comes with that because they were both pretty impressive their first year in the system in their own, kind of in different ways, right? In terms of what matches their play style and things like that. Now, things become a little bit more free for them on the defensive line, and I think that they inherently get better. Bryan Bresee inherently takes a step forward, all that. But having that other guy, that's a veteran guy, I think could have gone a long way for maybe quelling again some of the concerns at this point in the offseason and maybe produce more consistent and ready production at the very beginning of the season. This would also have given the New Orleans Saints somebody just in case Christian Boyd at any point looks like he needs more time. Now, the Saints can still end up addressing this at a later time, but the bigger names on the market are all gone. And you probably were never going to land the biggest names with the way that the Saints have managed the salary cap and things like that over the course of this offseason, but certainly could have landed something somewhere. And so having that veteran to fall back on in case Christian Boyd's not super ready right away and all those other things, I think that there could have been value in all of that. Now you're just hoping that Christian Boyd will be ready. And look, everything that we've seen so far through not training camp. I always do that. Through OTAs, through mini camps. I hope one day we get to just call it all training camp. I really, really do. But right now the process is split. So what we saw during OTAs, what we saw during mini camps and things like that was really, really promising when it comes to Christian Boyd. So maybe the Saints don't necessarily need that. So it would be another way that a veteran defensive tackle could be of value. Well, injury, right? And also, it's a heavy rotation of defensive tackles. So even if we're not talking about injury being the reason why a defensive tackle isn't on the field, there will be reasons that Bryan Bresee or Colin Saunders or Christian Boyd or Nathan Shepard aren't on the field for any given down or set of downs or drive or whatever. That could be injury. That could just be the rotation. That could be snaps. That could be whatever. It could be the down and distance. It could be the game situation, all that. So maximizing your opportunity to have another guy to slot in that has production at an NFL level, experience at an NFL level, all these things I think could have, again, raised the floor of what the production of that room could be. So let's take a look at some of the options that were out there that the Saints did not invest in. I'm going to start with the ones that I don't blame them for not investing in. Guys like Christian Wilkins, guys like DJ Reader, who are actually, I might actually just end that list at Christian Wilkins, if I'm being honest. I think Christian Wilkins is one of the most fun players to watch in the NFL. You want an example of somebody who plays up to their absolute best through the route of joy with their determination, kind of like we were talking about with Bub Means. Go to TikTok, go to IG Reels, go to YouTube, whatever, and just search Christian Wilkins funny. And just go and watch this dude have so much fun playing the game of football. That is a reason to believe in a player. Now, Christian Wilkins also got $27.5 million per year in his contract, which is why I do not blame the New Orleans Saints for not having made that investment. So I completely understand that one. But that is a name that if I didn't bring up, I would have been remiss for not bringing the name up and at least addressing like, hey, here's the I get it portion of this segment. The other names, guys like DJ Reader, $11 million per year. A reunion with Sheldon Rankins, $12.25 million per year. However, that would have flown in the face of what we just covered about the Saints turning the page. But doing so on the defensive side seems to be, a place where you could see those reunions and things like that. A'Shawn Robinson, who received $7.4 million in a one-year deal. And then Armon Watts, who received $2.2 million in his new deal. I think any of those four guys would have been worth the money. It would have been challenging to sign a guy like DJ Reader or Sheldon Rankins. You would have had to do all the salary cap maneuvering and all those other things. Would it have been worth it for what is considered a non-premium, quote unquote, position in the NFL, but is about to become a more important position in the NFL again, the way that it was at one point in an earlier time. Time is cyclical, everybody. Here we go. We're going through the ebbs and flows of the NFL because the run games are about to become a lot bigger. The run games are about to become a lot more of an emphasis. And so therefore, non-premier positions, quote unquote, like defensive tackle and linebacker, are about to become really, really, really at a premium, if not premium positions themselves or premier positions themselves. So I get that would have been challenging to sign those players and create the extensions and push the money down the road and the void years and all those other things. It doesn't really work with what the Saints were trying to do this offseason of not doing that, right? But I think that in addition, like Armon Watts, I don't think that an addition like Kendall Vickers hurts at all. I just know that he has the versatility of like playing on the end and playing on the inside and stuff like that. And I'm thinking like a true run stopping defensive tackle. I think Kendall Vickers is a more athletic pass rusher / versatile piece that can go inside and out, Tano Passigno-ish in that case. And I wonder how much too, having Tano Passigno not having gone down with an Achilles injury would make me feel different about this very conversation as well, now that I think about it. But there's nothing the Saints could have done about that. So it's just another example of why like the injury thing is something worth being prepared for with another veteran defensive tackle. But the Saints didn't go that route. That doesn't mean that they went the wrong route. It just means that they tried to address it in other ways. So here's how they tried to address it. First of which is what we discussed before, the inherent improvements that come with Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard and Brian Brzee being in their second years in this system or second year overall when it comes to Brzee. They made the draft pick of Christian Boyd. They added Kendall Vickers. They've addressed from other areas. And the hope is that they'll get Tano Passigno back at some point during the 2024 season. So they still address the defensive line. They just did it in different ways. It didn't include the big name or the recognizable name at the position. And that's all right. That's all right. All right, y'all. Hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a little bit of a laid back episode. I'm kind of chilling. I'm on vacation mode and it feels really nice. And so I'm just kind of in the process of appreciating every moment. So I just want to say that I appreciate you very much for being here. And of course, for making us your first listen of the day, every day. And don't forget that with that NBA draft underway, 2 selections up and down for the New Orleans Pelicans. You want the latest on those selections and how they could potentially impact the Pelicans. Jake Madison's covering it from every angle here throughout the rest. And of course, what should still be a very, very interesting offseason for the teams. Make sure you go and check out Locked on Pels with Jake Madison, and make sure you check out Locked on LSU with the return of Matt Moscona. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making Locked on Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And just Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you. I'm just kind of in the process of appreciating every moment.